you cannot be a military power in space if you're not an economic power in space.
I'm obviously, sort of biased as a space sci-fi geek, but this is always by far my favorite panel of the year, and so look forward to having a great conversation. And everybody here on stage is also a space sci-fi geek. Probably not everyone in the audience is, and so I think it'll be helpful to set the stage a little bit. Right now, as you may or may not know, commercial space is absolutely flourishing. Rockets are launching and landing basically every single day. But at the same time, the Chinese are launching their own space station. They're landing rovers on the far side of the moon, and returning, core drilling samples back. And so I'm excited to talk with my, sort of three panelists today about how America can continue to maintain its superiority and stay ahead of China. To maybe start off with you, sort of Bucky, there is so much activity going on, both for things that are relevant to the warfighter, civil space. Mm-hmm. How should a layman think about all the activities in space and what it means for the country?
Well, space is very exciting. Not a day goes by that there's not something significant happening. In opening, I want to just express my sincere gratitude to all the private investors in the audience who actually make this possible. It wasn't that long ago that we were completely out of the commercial space launch business. That was like, 20, 25 years ago, and the state of Florida was looking pretty gloomy at the future. And then it was really private investment, innovation from the commercial sector that's launched this renaissance in space that we're enjoying today. So what's really exciting, 10 years ago, launch to orbit was a real challenge. That's not a challenge today. I'm sure we'll hear more about that. Proliferation of satellites. Two companies have proliferated constellations, Planet with the Doves, and then of course SpaceX with Starlink. There's a lot of room for growth there, and on a proliferation side, in space manufacturing, which Delian is personally involved in, but things like space internet, getting away from our reliance on ground-based fiber and doing data transport, edge compute, and transactions in the space layer. Logistics that will enable us to do greater things, and then in-space power so that we can actually industrialize space. These are all really important things for the economic growth of this country in the coming decades. And we need U.S. to lead the way, and we have to keep an eye on China because they are fast following us, which was the term used earlier. So we have to be mindful of that and maintain our lead.
And yet, Tim, you guys aren't just sort of resting on your laurels of the Falcon 9 becoming this incredibly operational vehicle, starting to develop obviously this largest sort of rocket that humanity's ever attempted to sort of build, Starship, and starting to try to make that to eventually transport sort of humans and boots back sort of on the moon. Talk to us about the sort of ambition of Starship and where you guys are headed.
Sure. Internally, there's a phrase that we use from time to time that it looks hard and it's harder than it looks. The Starship vehicle is the natural evolution of where we've tried to go as a company on the rocket side, in that it is a fully and rapidly reusable vehicle. It is designed for that purpose. That is the holy grail of rocketry, and that's been sort of an article of faith internal to SpaceX really from day one. And so this vehicle is being designed to be highly replicable and highly reusable. And we had the dramatic catch of the rocket. We've now done that a couple of times in Boca Chica, Texas recently. And we're working very, very hard to achieve upper stage full reusability as well. And once you're able to do that, you can do these tremendous additional things in space that will enable the industry to flourish even more. So we're hoping to solve the transportation problem to a large degree. Obviously, the Falcon 9 is a wonderful vehicle, and we'll keep flying Falcon 9. But as little as 2010, as Bucky referenced, 2010, the United States had 0% market share of the commercial launch market. In this past year, we took roughly 85% of the mass to orbit into space with the Falcon vehicles. And then reusability has really enabled things like the Starlink constellation, because you're able to launch, in effect, on demand, roughly every 2.2 days right now.
Yeah, that launch cadence this week in particular, we broke a most launches in 24 hours record earlier this week. There's a launch that will be happening later today. There are 2 launches that will be happening tomorrow. So the cadence is something that humanity has never, ever achieved, and it's because of reusability. Congressman Whitesides, you obviously, prior to your, career here in the Congress, worked in the, sort of space industry. How do you take that perspective into Congress and recognize these massive, fundamental, sort of changes that are happening to the space industry that allow us to, stretch our dollars further from, sort of the taxpayer to enable next-gen space capabilities?
So thanks, Delian, and nice to see everybody here today. I'd like to tell a story. First of all, Tim and I have known each other for like over 20 years, and it's incredible what you and the team have done. I mean, it's incredible,
well,
and it's truly science fiction.
And you're a congressman now.
Yeah, and that's cool. I mean, for anybody who knows me, that's incredible too.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'd like to tell a story. When I was starting out in my career in the '90s, right? That's how old I was. I went to a family friend, a guy who was running the CIA, I think at the time. And I was trying to decide what to do with the rest of my life, right? And I was like, well, there are 3 things that are interesting, right? The first is neuroscience, right? The second is this new thing called the internet. And the third is space, right? And so this is a super smart guy. We happen to know him through the family. And he said, well, listen, neuroscience, interesting. It's like the early days of biotech. Potentially that could be an interesting thing. Internet, don't understand it very well, but seems like it might be big. But whatever you do, don't go into space, because nothing interesting is happening there, and there's not much innovation. And I was just excited about space, so I thankfully ignored him, and then, the rest is history, right? We've gone through this incredible period in American industry where, Tim and all these other companies have reinvented American industry. We should be super proud of that. I was a small part of that at the Obama administration, chief of staff, helped, honestly fight the Hill to get that contract to SpaceX for human spaceflight, and obviously the technical team at Tim's company has just done incredible wonders. Then ran Virgin Galactic for 10 years, building a human spaceflight vehicle and sort of incubated an orbital launch vehicle along the way. Look, it is an incredible time, and as Bucky says, we cannot let our foot off the gas, right? We are leading the world. Luckily, when we made those bets in the Obama administration on trying to bring greater commercial stuff into space, most of them paid off, which is good. If they hadn't, it would have been a tougher story, but it worked. And now, as you say, the competition that we see from China and Russia is scary, right? Yeah. Because they're coming on fast. And so we need to make sure that Congress supports that innovation, that we're not just supporting folks who have made it, but that we're also helping new players come in to get across the valley of death, which is something that I think you're thinking a lot about these days.
Every day.
And I think the positive message that I would share is that there seems to be bipartisan support for that now. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, right, on the Strategic Forces and Cyber Committee, as well as some others. And what I see is bipartisan support for this, because what we see out there, particularly in the classified world, is so scary, right? There is stuff coming down which is really scary stuff. And so we need to work together as sort of a best of America to make sure that we're up to the threats that we face.
Well, I know we can't talk about sort of classified operations here, but there's clearly a lot more activity in space that is becoming more and more sort of militarized. Many of that has been sort of publicized. The Battle of Britain, back in sort of World War II, was basically the first truly all-air sort of battlefield. Bucky, now that we're starting to see this type of activity, what do you think that first all-space battlefield looks like? China starts to approach Taiwan. They're bringing Navy ships there, but they're almost certainly going to be doing things in space at the same time.
Yeah, well, you've heard it ever since the Space Force was created, that space is a contested domain. First, and most of the commercial companies know this, cyber attacks happen in the space layer on a regular basis. So, and in the cyber domain, we already have, some level of low-intensity conflict. Here's how the Department of Defense looks at war fighting, right? So priority one, deter, right? So we peace through strength. We build a lot of capabilities. We flex our muscle commercially and otherwise to demonstrate that we should be messed with. And that's actually, deterrence is actually the best long-term solution. We have to be prepared to defend. General Hyten, when he was in the service, talked about the disadvantage of having big, juicy targets, right? So we have a lot of national capabilities that, including GPS, that need to be protected, and to lose GPS would cause quite a ripple economically and otherwise. So defending is really important. And then, of course, defeat or winning. We as a nation always have to be prepared to win if forced to fight. The Battle of Butow, I'm glad you chose that as an example because the Germans lost that battle, and they lost it because of hubris. Their technology was not up to speed, and they made other strategic errors. So mainly, they miscalculated the response of Great Britain, and I think there's a lot of parallels there in the space domain. So the last thing I'll say about this is you cannot be a military power in space if you're not an economic power in space. And so the coupling of our ability to work with and utilize commercial capabilities as part of our greater portfolio of capabilities for all phases, deter, defend, win, is really paramount.
So last year, Space Force's budget for the first time eclipsed NASA's budget. So militarized space, being a larger, sort of set of activity. As the sort of policymaker and person responsible for sort of budgets on this panel, how do you think Congress needs to continue to adapt to this idea that more and more military activity will be happening in space? But also, what are some of the policy changes that need to happen so that sort of next generation capabilities like Starship, like the Varda reentry vehicle, aren't stymied by overburdened regulatory sort of processes in order to sort of hit the cadence that they need?
One of the really important strands this session, I think, that we can make a lot of progress in is in the area of defense acquisition reform. The innovations, the contractual innovations that Tim and team worked on literally 15 years ago to figure out how the commercial sector can work with the government sector, I think were crucial to the success of the public-private partnership that has ushered in this new age in space. And we need to keep working on that, right? I think we also, so part of that will be regulatory, like you say, thinking about not just sort of the funder side, but the regulatory side, whether that's FAA, DoD, Spectrum, these other different areas that, really shape how private companies, even like yours, can succeed or not, right? And what we see on the Armed Services Committee and on the Science Committee, I think, is a bipartisan support for trying to make sure that American industry is winning, right? And so if any of you have ideas on how to make the American, procurement system work better, now is the time to get those ideas in, because there's a very focused construct going on right now to think about how we can integrate those ideas in. And many of you have interacted with that world. And so we need those ideas, and now's the time to get them in. Look, at the end of the day, I think that we need to build from strength, right? We're actually doing pretty good. And the great stuff that happened in civil space, we need to make sure it translates into defense, the defense world. That's happening through the great work that Bucky and his team and others around the government are doing. And we need to have, I think, an attitude of continuous improvement. Like, we can't just solve procurement reform this year and then be done for 10 years. I've been encouraging folks to think about, let's have people whose job is to knock down red tape and think about how to make the system work better ongoingly. Because, the constraints that we sometimes face are not ones that the Chinese face when they're trying to do procurements, right? So we need to make sure that we have a level playing field for our companies.
We've used the word, sort of commercial several times on this panel, but I think it's important to distinguish that there are sort of two types of commercial. There's firm fixed price commercial contracts, like what SpaceX, sort of offered to NASA for cargo resupply to the International Space Station. And then there's commercial, where there's an entire market completely outside of the DoD or the US Gov, like Starlink's, sort of internet, case for consumers. I guess, Tim, I'd love to understand how you guys at SpaceX think about the word commercial internally, and how you prioritize those two different types of commercial.
Yeah, I think it's a misunderstood term, perhaps intentionally from time to time. Commercial to us does in fact mean firm fixed price, but it fundamentally means that you're putting your own skin in the game and you're taking some element of risk against a set financial outcome. And if you fail relative to that outcome, then like any commercial business, then you fail relative to that outcome. You aren't protected with a cost plus arrangement. But at core, commercial fundamentally means that there's an alternative market, or dual market for your use case. So if you look at our rockets, they serve the commercial launch market. If you look at Starlink, Starlink serves commercial users around the globe. So commercial really does mean duality of purpose. And I think the government is a great purchaser of commercial items, not just by purchasing on a firm fixed price basis, which I think in many, many cases is the right approach, but also by looking at the dual use nature of things and saying, okay, I'd like to take maybe 80% of the goodness of the economies of scale and price achieved by mass production of things, and then I can tweak it at the margins, as opposed to saying, I want to buy a bespoke product, I'm going to plan for it 5 years in advance, I'm going to hope that there's a funding profile associated with it, and then I'm going to freeze things in place. And then I do want to jump on the back end of something that the congressman said here, and that is that the regulatory piece I do think is the real boring but important piece of all this, and that is you might have the funding, you might have the program, but if you're doing it in a commercial fashion, if the regulatory environment does not allow you to move at speed and to iterate, then you are fundamentally lost. And I think that there's a profound disconnect right now in the space world relative to the regulations that have existed forever, and the fact that companies can launch every 2 days. Companies are building at scale and deploying massive constellations that serve the globe. And there has to be this speed of reform that is consistent and constant in order to honor that new metric. Like, gone are the days where you have frozen designs in 15-year procurement cycles.
Let me amplify this, Tim. The rate of change of technology today is off the charts, right? And the procurement process that we use in the government does not factor agility at all. So we have you basically have waterfall design, and it takes decades sometimes to build and buy things, and by the time you field them, they're obsolete. And then you spend more money to try to make them relevant. And so commercial is the best at agile, and I think the best thing we can be on the government side is more flexible. That's why we use other transactions and firm fixed price, but we're not inflexible. We can modify, just like a change order on a commercial contract, to take and factor that agility and make sure that the only requirement we care about is technological relevance. You can't get that if you froze the technology 20 years ago.
You've talked about, Bucky, what the department needs to do to adopt commercial technologies. So maybe sort of flip that question of, what do you think commercial leaders like, sort of Tim and myself misunderstand about what the Pentagon, sort of is thinking about, and how they're, sort of prioritizing adoption of commercial technologies?
Well, there's a new sheriff in town, and one of the first policy memos that came out of the Secretary's office is to use other transactions as a primary means of contracting for software, which is huge. And just so you know, other transactions in the acquisition world is kind of like the dark arts. They usually don't do it, but But in the right instances, using the authorities that Congress gave us to work with companies that are doing the agile development is really the right move.
So we've had, sort of astronauts, sort of make it to the Senate, but, George, I think you're really one of the first examples of like somebody that was truly in the commercial space industry, sort of now in Congress. I guess, do you hope that our, industry contributes more into that world, or any, sort of lessons learned from your first, 3 months now, sort of in Congress and, diving into the deep end?
One of the things that I hope to bring to Congress is a better understanding of risk. Right? There are not a lot of people who have seen the good and the bad of developmental tests up close. And it's hard, and you have good days and you have bad days. And what I have found in my career is that if you have that conversation around risk up front, then when you have a bad day, you have a more efficient way to move forward. Versus what you sometimes get in Congress, which is like, let's beat the crap out of that thing because you failed, right? And I think in the world that we're moving into, an attitude where we beat the crap out of people who try hard to achieve something and maybe, move fast and occasionally fail, is not going to get us to where we need to go. And so my hope is that one of the things that I can bring to both the Armed Services Committee and the Science Committee, where I'm serving on as well, is a better understanding of the risk posture that we need to take as a government, as a buyer, as a country, in order to compete and also to move as quickly and as well as we can into what I think should be an incredible future.
Absolutely. And Tim, you guys, started from this, sort of total underdog, George and crew had to, help make sure that, anybody was even willing to take you guys, sort of seriously. And now, call it, sort of 20, sort of plus years later, you guys are the, sort of most dominant, sort of player in the U.S., sort of ecosystem.
A real overnight success.
Yeah. And so, what are the challenges in some ways of just like having this type of just like global reach, success? The fact that you guys are now serving everything from Starlink on the commercial side to Starshield on the DoD side.
Yeah, actually, you've got to have an engineering workforce that speaks to the ability to iterate and rapidly evolve. And it's really tough to find the best engineers in the world against that metric. Sometimes we actually turn away opportunities because we are sort of picking, internally we call it the main quest versus a side quest. And we want to put our engineers on the main quest all the time. Because the business has evolved in a significant fashion. We've gone from a pure play rocket launch provider to now a global ISP coupled with obviously a company that is supporting NASA and DoD in profound and important ways. But in the end, it really comes down to outstanding engineering. Mm-hmm. We have what is called internally a great signal to noise ratio. So engineers offer signal, and lawyers offer noise, right? And so you want the right signal to noise ratio.
And this was maybe sort of rapid fire sort of for the panel, but a part of the main quest at SpaceX is boots on sort of Mars. Mm-hmm. There's also been some core focus within Congress and the nation on sort of beating the Chinese to the moon. What does the panel think our shots are at making sure that we get boots on the moon and Mars first before our adversaries do?
Yes, we should do that.
Yeah.
We will do that, for sure. But we can't screw it up.
Yeah.
But for the right reasons, right? We got to go to stay, and we have to go, like the moon in particular, we need to go there to industrialize it. There's 35 minerals of national security significance that you can literally sift out of the regolith of the soil because it's chemically fractionated. And there's many prizes like that we'll glean from the moon. So not just go there to plant a flag and say we've done it. We got to go there, and it's going to be the lily pad for stepping off into the solar system. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I just say philosophically, our goal has always been Mars. That's like the ultimate ultimate goal. But really, what you want to do is build the technologies that serve all these capabilities, right? And be able to do that in a fashion that speaks to markets you don't even quite understand at this point. the core technologies. That's why we're so focused on full and rapidly reusable first stage and upper stage, so that you can do all these things, and then you end up with an American capability to land Americans on Mars.
I'll offer one thing: extraterrestrial. Most of the policy about our human activities in an extraterrestrial sphere will probably emanate from the moon, and precedent. But I think that we have to just go and populate the solar system. It'd be awesome.
Let's go to the moon.
Go.
Thank you so much for
Do it.
joining me on stage today, guys. Really appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Hey, it's great.